it's one of those things that I've been harping on about for years. But I've just accepted now that the new esports fan truly doesn't care about anything that's important. The new esports fan ultimately is a pleb tourist teenager who just want to watch a fireworks display for free, obviously. And they don't care about the structure of the circuit, conflict of interest. They wouldn't even care, actually, if it was all rigged, if it was WWE, essentially. And, you know, we're only about 2 levels of abstraction from that reality at this moment in time. It's sad. I've tried to be the watcher on the wall and fight the good fight for years, but people don't even care about just elementary conflict of interest anymore. People just don't even give a shit. People don't care about obviously fixed matches anymore. They just don't care. There's just not, you know. So this is all academic. This is for the old school, the people that might find this interesting and know a little bit of history. But anyway, the long story short is, I regret to inform you that there is fuckery afoot, and I want to just put a disclaimer in right at the start of this broadcast and what will eventually become a YouTube video. Hi, YouTube, shalom. Obviously, this is a weird subject for me to talk about because I'm kind of compromised. I'm going to be talking about ESL, which is a company, obviously, ever since the Saudi takeover. I mean, even before that, if we're being honest, I've been very vitriolically, you know, critiquing them to the point where I'm now blacklisted. They won't reply to any journalistic inquiry via email. I'm not welcome at their events anymore. I mean, even back pre-Saudi, you know, if I'd written a spicy story about ESL, I could still go to the events and hang out with my friends. That is now a rescinded offer. But the problem obviously comes in when I have a working relationship with a rival to ESL, which is PGL. Obviously, I'm the host of their circuit, and I'm doing their events in CS and Dota, and it's quite a lucrative deal for me, right? And so, obviously, I want to just insert that up front before we get into the discourse, because it's really up to you to decide whether or not that paycheck is informing my opinion and the things I'm saying, or whether these are my genuine opinions. You know, whether or not I've been bought by PGL to say these things ultimately will have to be your determination. I can tell you that it wouldn't make a difference. You know, I had a working relationship with PGL when I tore strips off PGL in 21 and then didn't work with them for years, and even turned down the opportunity to work the next major they had in Antwerp. I was like, look, I don't want to work with you after this. So you can decide whether or not I am being bought and paid for, let's say, whether I'm paid opposition. But ultimately, I'm just me. Money has never been a great motivator for me, which is why I will die in abject poverty from cirrhosis of the liver in approximately 10 years, if I'm lucky. So anyway, with that out the way, I'm sure you've noticed that there's been some kind of strange things happening when it comes to the circuit. Most notably, there are teams that are absent from PGL events that are in attendance at ESL events. And look, again, we knew there was going to be some choices made. We knew there was going to be some events, big teams were going to sit them out, because if you're not right, or you're tired, or you're exhausted, it's better to not attend than it is to attend and lose. That's how VRS ranking points work. We'll talk more about that in the second half of the broadcast. But the other aspect is the calendar is now so full because we've got rid of the partnered leagues that events just run up and bump up against each other. So it's not viable to go from one event to another event, particularly if it's a transcontinental flight. You just can't do it, best will in the world. And so I said it was going to be interesting to see what choices were made and what incentives were going to be offered for the teams that attended the certain events. Well, as you can imagine, there's a number of teams that have always been power brokers within their relationship with ESL, and you know who they are. But we'll explicitly talk about some of them in a bit. But, you know, the big teams, the teams that were there when they tried to create the fucking Monopoly League in 2015, when Valve were on holiday in Hawaii, the ones that were in their partnered leagues, the ones that were in WESA, if you remember that, the World Esports Association. It's all the same names. And what they do is, because they have a huge following, a lot of fans, and have historically worked with ESL, they ultimately leverage their relationship to get a better cut of the ecosystem. And as you saw when we were laying out the calendar, a lot of this prize pool isn't prize pool at all. It's actually going straight to the orgs. Blast explicitly said, we are going to pay teams to attend. And PGL have created a fund for teams to attend, as in we will help costs for hospitality and travel and accommodation. What ESL tried to do was ultimately cloak what they were doing by saying it was prize pool and then announcing a split between org and team. And I've talked about this on other videos as well, but it's just so this is all in one place so you can understand the pieces on the board, so to speak. This is the HLTV news write-up about it, which is club financial incentives introduced as ESL reveals more EPT details. And you can see here that things like Katowice and Cologne, the prestige tournaments you might call them, they still have a prize pool of $1.25 million. The players get $1 million of that, and the club gets $250,000 of that. So the overwhelming amount goes to the players. Then when you look at something like Dallas, IEM Spring, and IEM Chengdu, you go, oh, hey, we're giving $1 million away in prize money. Okay, and you go, oh, that's fucking crazy. That's like a big bump. Those events were usually like $250,000, $300,000 kind of tournaments. And then you look and you go, oh, the players are still getting $300,000. And the clubs, the orgs, are getting $700,000, and ESL are LARPing like it's a $1 million tournament, which it isn't. All this is a partnered league revenue share by any other name. And then you look at like the ESL Pro League, Seasons 21, Seasons 22. Again, it's a $1 million tournament. Wow, that's huge for a Pro League. Okay, the player share is still $400,000. And the clubs are getting $600,000. And so anyway, behind the scenes, this was ultimately negotiated because, well, two things happened. So first of all, they got rid of the partnered leagues, and all of the teams, all of the orgs and ESL conspired essentially to get together and say, how the fuck can we say, fuck you to Valve, we want to keep our partnered leagues? Because that's what works. And ultimately, this sort of came out of that. The other thing was, the ESL were like, well, don't worry about it, because most of you are going to be in the Esports World Cup with our guy Ralph Reichart. Totally independent to ESL, by the way. I want to make that abundantly clear. Sure, he was the co-founder of ESL. He was on the board of ESL. He knows all of these orgs. He's historically worked for ESL, but now totally nothing to do with ESL. He is an Esports World Cup man. I want to make that abundantly clear. He was bought by Riyadh, and he certainly doesn't have any biases towards ESL orgs or ESL staff whatsoever. There's no way that could be true. I mean, sure, ESL produce the Esports World Cup and do production, for multiple tournaments there. But no, I mean, there's obviously no bias. It's just another business relationship. It certainly wasn't a way that Saudi-owned ESL could essentially corner more of the public investment fund. That's just not how it would work at all. And so just wanted to make that clear in case people were seeing ties and links where there weren't any. So anyway, and even though a lot of the orgs that are leveraging ESL to get these payments are also getting the Esports World Cup stipend, this is just a series of coincidences, guys. And you really, the human brain is aligned to see coincidences and make them facts and see conspiracies where there aren't any. And you have to really be careful about falling into that trap. So anyway, this money was essentially the way that ESL were able to continue to have participation from the big named organizations, the Navis, the G2's, and ensure that they would still attend their tournaments. And that's fine. By the way, I have no issue with that in and of itself. on its face, I think ultimately orgs do need a slice of the pie somewhere in it. I wouldn't frame it as it being a prize pool. I think that's disingenuous. I think they've done that on purpose to try and deceive the community. A prize pool has always been understood for as long as I've been in esports, that the prize is what goes to the players. And by the way, in case you're not familiar with how this works, the organizations do get a cut of that money too. We've kind of moved. It used to be you had to give the players a 0% agreement in the contract that you wouldn't take any of their prize money if you wanted to get the best players. Because the shitty orgs would take 15, 20, 25%, and players would just go, well, I can just go to this org over here and keep it all. Now, increasingly, orgs have justified runaway esports expenses to say, hey, look, can we just take 10% of the prize cut? And so when you're talking about, $1 million, yeah, okay, 100 grand isn't a fucking lot of money in terms of running an esports team and a high-level CS team. That's not even going to cover all 5 players' salaries for a month. But they do double dip. They do take money as well from that. And some orgs I've seen in the past, I've seen as high as 50%. I remember there was a worrying trend in Dota 2 back in the day where if you basically if you had a Dota contract, it would be they would only take 10% of the prize money unless the tournament had more than $1 million total prize pool, and then it suddenly went up to 50%. And this is what we called the TI clause, colloquially behind the scenes. It was ultimately if you qualified for TI and got a shot at that life-changing money, it wasn't going to be so life-changing because suddenly your cut to the org was 50%. That's the type of fuckery that goes on behind the scenes, just in case you're unaware. That happens less so today, but that type of clause still exists in some of the lesser organizations, particularly in Tier 2. Be careful what you sign, kids. Anyway, so I don't have a problem with big orgs agreeing to go to the biggest tournament operators' events. Where it gets where the waters get a little bit muddy is where it's clear there is a quid pro quo for not attending other people's events. It ultimately goes, in my opinion, against the spirit of the open circuit. The open circuit is meant to be, we've got all of these events and you just pick and choose and you go to the ones maybe the players would like to go to, or if you need more VRS points, you go to this one to try and win, and if you don't need VRS points, maybe you have a holiday. And that was kind of what Valve were trying to do, and that's what we thought we were going to get. Instead, what we've ultimately got is ESL are going to keep their partnered league, essentially, via the mechanism of these payments, not to mention the esports World Cup stipend being a cudgel they can wield whenever they want, because if you don't acquiesce to ESL, the total non-connection between ESL and the Esports World Cup, I mean, I'm just saying there's a potential there, isn't there, to get threatened and say, well, listen, we'll take away your Saudi stipend. And then what? And so it was announced with PGL Cluj around the corner, which is PGL's first prestige event of the year of their circuit. After the major that they did for Shanghai at the end of 24. And the list of teams came along, and multiple teams, big-name teams, have decided that they are going to opt out. And this was the headline as it was reported in the Esports Insider. It was G2 Esports and Team Spirit would be opting out. They turned down their invite. How it works now is if you're there in the ranking, you get an invite, but you don't have to attend. Obviously, you can't be compelled to go and compete at a tournament. And so you can also see Vitality and Na'Vi are also not going to be there. So Immer isn't going to be, more on him in a moment, he's not going to be attending a prestige event in a stadium in his home country as a result of that. And reading between the lines, I got the impression he wanted to. So suddenly when you start looking at what that would do to viewership, if you look at like esports charts or any other metric measuring website we have for Twitch broadcasting streams and what have you, you will see that the most watched games will involve, first and foremost, Na'Vi. Increasingly, it's becoming true, it's Team Spirit. It's certainly G2. if it's not those two. And Vitality are right up there as well, along with FaZe, right? They're kind of like the popular teams that really give a bump in terms of viewership. And if you wanted to potentially harm a tournament operator, or if you wanted to leverage a tournament operator to get more out of them, viewership is a great way to do that. Why? Because unfortunately, for good or ill, viewership is tied to so many of the revenue streams in esports. It's silly in a way that we've allowed it to get to this. But being able to go to a sponsor and say, this is how many views we had, this is how many hours viewed we had, that's increasingly a more popular metric. This is how many, this was our peak, this was our, average concurrent. And the higher those numbers are, the more likely you are to get sponsors, more likely you are to get investors, the more likely you are to attract other bigger teams if this is relevant to your esport to attend, or maybe organizations to even pick up teams in the first place to compete in your event. There's a whole trickle-down ecosystem related just to this metric of how many people will watch, even though we all know that the average viewer wouldn't pay to watch the product they watch. They won't buy. They're not going to say, oh, this is sponsored by Intel. I will get the latest Intel chipset then. They don't care. They're not going to do that. Oh, this is sponsored by this website. I will use their service. No, they don't care. They're not going to do any of those things. And this is what we know increasingly to be true. So anyway, the working theory, let's say, is that a bunch of teams got together. They went to Blast, right? They went to ESL and they went to PGL, and they basically said, what are you going to give us to attend your events? And ESL said, well, we'll give you this, 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 and this, but secretly, wink, 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 here's a kicker. Maybe you don't go to PGL either, right? And they go, oh, okay, well, let's see what's on the table. And as I said, that's the working theory as to what's happened, because there's going to be one name that I haven't mentioned yet that is conspicuous by their absence. But just before we get into that, you go, Richard, sounds like you're trafficking in conspiracy theories again. Well, Immer posted on his Instagram, and it got translated by one of those sites, bo3.gg. You've seen them. You know the type of site we're talking about. And I've had it verified. I had the original Instagram post screenshotted, and I had it translated, and this is an accurate translation. And you can see what he had to say about it. Here he said, I see a lot of posts where people are wondering why we're not participating. All I can tell you is that we have contracts signed from the beginning of the year that determine where and when we compete. Oh, you do you? Well, that's kind of an interesting thing to say. Kind of an interesting thing to say out loud, because it's just meant to be an open circuit that runs off the VRS. And Valve are actively against partnered leagues and have explicitly said publicly you can't have undisclosed business relationships between leagues and teams. So, if he just said this part, if we were to participate, we wouldn't have any time to rest, considering we already have 6 or even 7 tournaments in a row. That would have been fine. But you've actually said there is some clandestine agreement signed that dictates where and when you're going to compete. Now, what he hasn't said is, with who? Who signed it? Does he mean the players have had to sign it? Is it just the org? Does he mean ESL? Does he mean Blast? What does he mean? We don't know the details. Also, I could extend an olive branch here and go, that could also just be a player talking out of his arse. And I'm sure that's going to be the official version moving forward. Silly player, didn't know what he was talking about. They're so dumb, right? And I guess we'll all just have to go back to bed and ignore the implications of what he's actually said. But for me, based on what I know and what I've heard and what I feel, having watched ESL attempt to monopolize the CS scene time and time and time and time again, interesting. Kind of makes me feel there might be something going on behind the scenes. Anyway, the next name that didn't attend was the other org you have to have if you want to get good viewership, because they represent the NA viewership, and that was Team Liquid. And this one's a little bit stranger, because Team Liquid missing out is actually not good for Team Liquid. Team Liquid really could use VRS points. That major's rolling around very, very soon. And especially with big names dropping out, surely Team Liquid would be looking at this and going, oh, wow, okay, actually, we're pretty guaranteed to have a deep run at this tournament because all the other big boys have pulled out. And yet, Team Liquid aren't attending, which is like, that's strange. Well, there's got to be a reason. And once again, the players piped up. Oh, players. And this is a report on dust2.us. Liquid's decision to skip PGL Cluj-Napoca was not the players. This decision could cost them a lot. Liquid's decision to decline the invite for PGL Cluj-Napoca has been extensively criticised by fans and pundits. Unlike the other teams skipping the tournament, Spirit, Vitality, G2 and Na'Vi, Liquid don't have much room to work with in the Valve regional standings. Turns out, though, that this controversial decision came from Liquid's management and not from the players or the coach. This was revealed by Liquid's head coach, Mitha, in a conversation with the caster Chad Sponge Birchall during the coach roundtable at IEM Katowice. Which, by the way, the hilarity of this being revealed by a member of Liquid at a roundtable at an ESL event is kind of funny. I know that I'm not the decision maker, Mitha told Sponge, who asked if Liquid's manager Joker Steve was the decision maker on Liquid. We discuss what tournaments we want to go to, but yeah, that's one of the things where we're being told what tournaments we go to, and I think that makes sense. There are a lot of details and meetings. I don't know who has discussed what with who. At the end of the day, there are some tournaments we go to and some that we skip. It's not going to matter too much for us whether it's one or the other. Mitha also said while he isn't excluded from such decisions, he's there to coach the team, and others make decisions like deciding which tournaments Liquid will attend. Now, depending on their results at IEM Katowice, which we now know to be dog shit, they finished 9th to 12th, Liquid would have to do significantly better in the next two tournaments, which are Pro League and Blast Open Lisbon. These will be their latest opportunities, meaning their last opportunities, to gain points on the ranking before the April 7th cutoff for the Blast.TV Austin Major. So, this is how much the financial incentives obviously mean to an organisation like Team Liquid. And I would imagine to every organisation that have chosen to skip PGL. That ultimately, they could go to PGL, get some VRS points in the bag, especially if you're Team Liquid, and there's going to be limited opportunities to get those points and climb. They're willing to roll the dice on missing out on a major for it. And we all know how much the sticker money is, so that kind of tells you. That's kind of very instructive as to the lay of the land. Also, in a response to this on Reddit, worth noting that Victor Goossens, a.k.a. Liquid Nazgul, he explicitly said why they were skipping out. I mean, not explicitly, because I imagine there's some implicit aspect to this that we can only speculate about. But here it is. Just a brief comment here. ESL has built an ecosystem together with teams for the last 5 years. They have shared revenues based on participation, ranking, brand strength, viewership, marketing deliverables, etc. Team participation allows for long-term planning, which can then in turn be transitioned into a consistent yearly calendar and consistency of events, stadiums throughout the year, and eventually revenues associated with promises that can be made to sponsors, broadcasters, ticket sales, fans, etc. All of these factors between tournament operators, teams, fans, and players work in cohesion. Sometimes there is friction, but in the end, we are all collaborating one way or another. In order for teams to achieve being part of any sport, we pay players salaries and build ecosystems or negotiate for our participation. The better of a job we do with this, the better it is long-term for players as well. This is the case for ESL, PGL, and others, and there are no exceptions to it. The fact that ESL has been more philosophically aligned for longer does not mean they get a free pass. You can read about their approach here, and he links to the ESL Gaming Tour 2025 update. Now, lastly, and this is very important, while top teams suffer the consequences from leveraging participation and not getting what we are looking for, it is actually the rest of the teams that benefit from the upside. A group of top teams negotiated our participation with ESL, Blast, and PGL, but all other teams benefit from the revenue sharing that Blast and ESL agreed to, plus they get to play PGL. So in that final paragraph, right, what he's ultimately said, whether I don't even know if he understands how direct that is. He's basically saying, yeah, we won't be playing at PGL. That's the intimation by him saying, plus those teams get to play PGL, not us. Those teams, those are the other teams. And also, a group of top teams negotiated our participation with ESL Blast PGL. We all got together. All of the teams got together and essentially strong-armed the tournament operators. So, okay, so you did do that then. Right, cool. That seems reasonable. And it's a very short-sighted view, because I'll explain my viewpoint. So first of all, not that it bothers anyone anymore. Obviously, they're ideologically compromised in the sense that they're owned by the Saudi Arabian government, and you're going to increasingly notice what the cost of that is going to be long-term. You're going to see things that don't make sense. You're going to see women's finals being played in Riyadh, and everyone going to be decidedly uncomfortable about that reality. You're going to see more tournaments being played in Riyadh. You're going to see organizations that you might like and support suddenly opening headquarters and offices in Qiddiya and everything else. And if the orgs push back against that, they're going to have their money faucet turned off. So ESL is essentially a government-operated esports tournament operator, which I don't like. I don't want governments running esports, funnily enough. Blast has the Danish government pulling the strings, and actually maybe even as profoundly as the Saudi Arabian government sticks its fingers in the gumbo for ESL and the Esports World Cup. We've had Danish government officials attend Blast events and talk about how good it is that esports is, creating jobs and opportunities in Denmark and other such nonsense. And then we've had also Danish officials fuck with PGL when they ran an event in Copenhagen and tried to pressure them to ban Russians when Blast had Russians. And not only did Blast have Russian players, the fucking guy that was trying to pressure PGL introduced Cloud9, a Russian team, on stage at a Blast event. So also, Blast financially haven't been in a great place. Do Blast have a long-term future as a tournament operator? They're planning events for 27. Is there a chance they're not here? I'd say it's slim, but I'd say it's a chance. Understand the reason that Denmark, the Danish government, owns as much Blast as it does is its equity in exchange for loans that weren't repaid. And this is all publicly available information, by the way. So let's imagine a world where, because PGL have a particular philosophy that they say doesn't align with their goals, PGL gets less and less viewership. People are care less and less about PGL. PGL sound guy, all of the memes, fuck PGL. That's Reddit's stance. And eventually PGL go, well, it's just not sustainable for us to run CS tournaments anymore. Then let's fast forward to the future where Saudi Arabia pack up their toys and say, right, well, we've conquered hearts and minds, ideologically speaking. Now, no one cares about women's rights anymore. They drive now, etc. And so we don't need to put money into esports tournaments anymore. And those organizations, those MGOs, they're going to turn around and go, oh, well, that's okay. We can just go to the PGL. Oh, shit, fuck. Yeah. So it's a very short-sighted play, but this is what these owners are like. Remember, the reason esports is in the toilet now is these guys. It's absolutely the MGO owners. They have been the biggest drivers of the esports winter and esports failure than anyone else. It was them who inflated the salaries. It was them that took the VC money and wasted it. It was them that went into the franchise model. It was them that told everybody during COVID that we can keep hiring. We're the only industry that's going to grow. It was all them. And if there's any money being poured out anywhere, they're in line with their fucking begging bowls. And they don't care. They're trans rights on a Monday and fucking Saudi government on a Tuesday. They don't give a fuck about anything except their bottom line. They have no fucking values. And when your industry is run by people that have no values and are short-sighted and, by and large, are incompetent, you get esports. So it's very short-sighted, I can tell you that, having been here 20 years and watched what we've become. But they'll never learn, and they'll never change. And fans won't make them change. Fans will just turn up, watch the esports slop, support the big-name orgs, support the big-name players, and the world keeps turning. And nobody really pays attention to the long-term view of where esports is going to go. And that's why we have to be bankrolled by governments now. It's all that's left. It was the only refuge left for a broken industry. But make no mistake, it was broken by these people. Now, while we talk about the differences in philosophy, let me just show you this, and you'll get an idea for where the problems arise, if you want to call them that. So I showed you how some tournaments are indeed not as equal as other tournaments, and how the MGOs have been trying to strong-arm TOs into getting more money and essentially having things that are partner leagues in anything but name. And so obviously, Silvio, you probably know Silvio, right? He's not very backwards about coming forwards. Speaks his mind, does what he wants, capable of fucking holding a grudge. Just a esports OG, right? And he's like me in the sense he believes he's got the right to an opinion because he's given his life to this thing and he doesn't care whether you like it or not. And that's fair. That's how it should be. So this is what he had to say. He said, I want to clarify how the 1.25 million USD funding for each PGL CS2 Tier 1 event is distributed. For the past 7 to 8 years, Counter-Strike had an unusual prize structure, one part for teams, another labelled as the regular prize pool, which from my understanding mostly went to players. I never really understood why it was structured this way. In this industry, unless a prize explicitly states team, club, organisation prize, or participation incentive, it's assumed to go to the players. We do things differently. Instead of splitting funds across different categories, everything goes into a single payment to the organisation. Teams will receive the full amount based solely on performance within 2 weeks of the event. It's up to the organisations to decide how they use the money, whether for salaries, team development, recruiting, or operations. PGL is not going to dictate how teams should allocate their earnings. There are no complicated structures, no unnecessary requirements, just a fair system. We do not force organisations to compete in most of our events in order to be rewarded. We focus on delivering top-tier events, and we appreciate everyone who enjoys them. I've been playing Counter-Strike since 2000. This game means a lot to me, and ever since PGL was founded. I've always done things my way, the way I believed things would work, by always making the decisions that I thought will push this community forward. Nothing will ever change that. Now, what he's saying there is, when it comes time to pay out the prize money that the team won at our event, we send it to the bank account by the organisation, and then that's it. We're done. And by the way, if you look at PGL's payout times, they're fucking insane. They're insanely quick. You'll never find anyone complaining about PGL these days. Just while, because we're going to talk about Starladder in a bit. So just to take that trip down memory lane. Also, as a member of Broadcast Talent, and again, remember, yes, working relationship, you decide whether this is just me glazing them for no reason or just a true story I think might be vaguely relevant to your interests. You get paid at the event. I got paid my entire fee for the major before I'd even completed the major. It was just in the bank, So they're very good. They understand the importance of money and why we're doing it. And they pay it to the orgs, and then it's up to the orgs to distribute it to the players, right? Makes sense. Now, in an ideal world, in an ecosystem that works, there wouldn't be any payments direct to the teams. Essentially, what ESL are doing are appearance fees. Let's just put that out there. There wouldn't be appearance fees. You would have a sensible portion of the prize money coming back to you, and you would take a bigger cut of that prize money than 10%. You would take something that makes it viable because you're already paying the players a fucking exorbitant salary in excess of $25,000 a month. So you would take a bigger cut of the prize money, but they don't. They take 10%, and then they negotiate for these appearance fees. And it's just crazy because on top of that, their flights are being paid for, their hotels are being paid for, they get access to practice rooms. I mean, it's changed so fucking much since my day when I came up, when it was you paid to participate. You had to pay for the hotel. You had to pay for the flights. You got absolutely no privileges or perks while you were there unless you paid more money. And the only way you were able to recoup any of the money was through sponsors. That's how that worked. And also, I'll just show you this. And just in case you think, oh, PGL aren't giving the orgs anything, so obviously they're not going to attend. Well, look, I mean, I'll just add, in their announcement for the 2025-2026 tour, you can see here, PGL is the only company that provides accommodation for 8 people per team, setting a new standard in hospitality for esports events. Each team will benefit from a comprehensive hospitality package that includes 8 round-trip flight tickets for team members, accommodation for 8 people per team in a minimum 4-star hotel, a hospitality package to cover food, beverages, and snacks throughout their stay, a practice room equipped for 6 people available during their stay. This extensive support ensures participants can focus entirely on their performance with all logistics and comfort needs taken care of. And that is now deemed to be the baseline. Although, you get 8 people instead of 6, which is the standard at other tournament operators, right? But that is now the baseline. That's not even exciting to organizations. And I probably shouldn't say so much about this, but I'll just say behind the scenes, orgs have been pushing for more than 6, and this can be for any reason. For some orgs, sure, it's support staff, right? Support staff, like, they've got a sports psychologist that might want to go there, or a nutritionist that might want to make sure they're eating well at the hotel, or, whatever it might be. There's definitely girlfriends and wives getting in on that. I'm just saying. Kind of seems that that's not what that's for, but, people can turn over the stones on that one if they wish. I don't care. It just doesn't, it's not a big deal, but the fact that this is being treated like it's some derisory crumb from a table is pretty wild. To me, especially for people like Victor, who've been in the scene probably longer than me. So yeah, then we ended up with another one of the big name teams pulling out, and it was Furia, and their reason doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I thought, oh, okay, well, because it wasn't announced with the guys that clearly negotiated this, and it's a setup. Right, like Furia, it must just be a visa problem or something, right? It must just be a visa issue. And it said, Furia withdraws from PGL Cluj-Napoca 2025. The team informed PGL that they have chosen to focus on securing the necessary travel documents for the major in the United States. This decision came unexpectedly for PGL, and we had to act quickly to find a team to replace Furia. So the version of events that's been explained to PGL is we can't attend the Cluj-Napoca event because we need to file paperwork for a visa. You had to give a better excuse than that. Surely you had to give it. That doesn't make any sense. That's what the players are filing the visa. Like, what are we talking about? Like, I've filed a visa. I've had exceptional persons visas from US. So you give all your information across to the lawyer, and then the lawyer sends in the application, and then you sit and you wait. That's it. Job done. I saw some people on Reddit speculating and saying, well, if you go to Romania while applying for a US visa, that could be bad because, maybe it's one of the countries on their list. If that were true, my friendos, then anyone who's attended a PGL event in 24 couldn't go to the fucking Austin major, could they? Wouldn't make any sense, you mad cunts. What are you talking about? And yes, as Head Mod in the chat points out, Romania is Schengen now. They entered into the Schengen agreement, much to everyone's consternation in esports, because it adds up your Schengen days. So, don't know why Reddit were clutching at straws on that one. But more importantly, I mean, fuck the average Reddit opinion. It's just so stupefyingly ill-informed. But why did Furia leave it to withdraw and then offer such a weak excuse. By the way, guys, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't need to lie about it. If you don't have a signed agreement with ESL breaking the spirit of why Valve did this in the first place, you don't need to tell any lies. You just say, we're not coming to your event. Appreciate the offer, but we'd rather kick our heels. But no, they didn't say that. And so PGL extended an offer to Imperial Female, who will be making an appearance later on in this stream. Hey, remember that trend when using the word female meant you were a woman-hating incel? You remember that week on Twitter? And then it was like everyone picked up women's teams and called them female. I was like, all right, yeah, that was good. That was a good week. Loved the culture war, me. But anyway, the final list of attendees for PGL, people have derided it online. I'll show you the final list. You can see it's going to be FaZe, who are the biggest team there and the favourites. Eternal Fire, Mouse, the Mongols, Falcons, Pain, Astralis, Virtus Pro, 3D Max, MIBR, Big, Wildcard, FlyQuest, Complexity Saw, and now Imperial Female. And this is obviously not to say the same caliber of attendees as what we had during Katowice, right? So, job done, I guess. I guess the intended knock-on effect to try and strong-arm... There's two ways this went down. Either they're doing it quid pro quo because ESL are giving them the appearance fees they leveraged for themselves, or they're doing it to strong-arm PGL into giving the orgs appearance fees, which I don't think Silviu's ever going to do, especially not based on that public statement I just read to you. So it's an interesting byproduct of the open circuit. And for me, the open circuit was meant to give organizations, by extension players, choice. It was to create scarcity of matchups, which gives value to fans. It wasn't so we could just have the same teams play Blast and ESL, Blast and ESL, Blast and ESL, and ignore all the other tournaments on the circuit because you have an agreement with those organizations. That wasn't what we were doing it for. And so I would urge Valve, I mean, I'm sure they are, that they're very aware of everything that's going on in esports. I would urge Valve to take a look at it. I'd be calling a meeting myself and wanting answers. I'd want to know what IMA means by contract signed. I'd want to know what Victor means by saying we had a meeting and we talked to ESL about what we need to... I'd want explicit answers as to what these things are. But as I said, as someone that's going to be working this event, you know, my attitude is kind of like, you know, fuck these guys. Like, it's ridiculous that we're still doing this stuff. I've been in esports so long. I remember the fucking G7, which was all the big orgs and all the fuckery they used to pull. Na'Vi bullying fucking admins to turn over decisions, you know, because results didn't go their way, and just all sorts of historic nonsense. When these orgs get too big for their fucking britches, it just goes to, like, stupid places. And so, you know, you've got to stare them down for good or ill, even if it's going to make you fucking take a hit in viewership or whatever else. Just crazy. And look, ultimately, the way karmic justice gets meted out here is Team Liquid don't qualify for the major, but they're probably the only team that have done this that it could realistically happen to. That would definitely give you food for thought, because I know, and again, I've been asking around behind the scenes, it's accurate. Players would have liked to have been here. Ima said what he said because he would have liked to have been here. He got in trouble over saying what he said. And yeah, there's also a potential for Furia not to qualify for the major. You know, you want to play stupid games, you can win stupid prizes. That's fine. Definitely do that. And also, by the way, don't just take it from me. Take it from a better journalist than I'll ever be. Striker, he's here. He said this on HLTV Confirmed. I'll play you the clip.
Saying it for fucking months now. Yeah. We know which, like, that the top teams are not happy with PGL just putting everything in the prize pool, right? And we are seeing the results of that. That's effectively what's happening here. They wanted some revenue share. They didn't end up getting it, so they're skipping PGL. Whether they're going to keep skipping PGL, I mean, for some of the teams, I outlined it in my column. I mean, that could be pretty fucking disastrous now that even Furia just dropped out, right? Like, those two teams.
But FaZe
didn't.
No? FaZe is the exception.
FaZe, no, but we know how FaZe operates. They've always been kind of whatever. Players have all to say that they want.
I think it was more sort of miscommunication within the FaZe camp than it was sort of that they're not a part of
the cabal,
the conversation.
What do you
And I love that by Yanko at the end. By the way, shout out to Striker. I love the fact that Striker brought that up on a podcast because, look, you have to also understand the ties that bind right now. There's never been more overlapping and interlocking problems. HLTV essentially run the VRS ranking, right? So Valve have essentially given them the blessing they've sanctioned that. It's like, it's Valve's GitHub fucking algorithm, but HLTV are the ones that are curating it and presenting it to the world. Also, as well, shout out to those three guys. Obviously, a lot of people, you're all ESL shills. We had all of that drama with their podcast and stuff. Yeah, I was fueling that drama, but, we'll muddle past that one now. And they're the ones calling it the cabal. And I love that Yanko at the end just said, listen, I don't think FaZe are going there because they're independent and the players are choosing to do it and they're being principled in this. I just think they didn't get the memo and didn't understand that everyone was meant to sit it out. And by the way, if Yanko is saying that, it's probably true. So it's kind of, it was a great, that was a really good episode of Confirmed. If you get an opportunity to watch it on their YouTube channel, I strongly recommend you do. This conversation goes on for a little bit longer, and it's really illustrative of kind of the lay of the land right now and what is going on with the open circuit. Not so open, is it? This is before, by the way, you get into all the other problems of like overlapping sponsors and just all this other stuff. The Esports World Cup Club Cup stipend, which is just like all of those teams are taking that. It all comes from the PIF. They say, oh no, it doesn't, because look, we're a non-profit organization that's funded by the PIF, but only initially, and then. It's Saudi money. They're all taking it from the same spot. You're right, also, by the way, Tim Bite in the chat. I believe that was the episode where they talked about techniques to shave your balls as well. But, everyone needs to know that, especially as you get older and they go grey and curly, right? So, anyway, there's more. There's more to the fuckery. And, again, I have to say, this is only judged on my gut feeling, right? And certainly I'm noticing a lot of coincidences, let's say. And, sometimes a coincidence is a coincidence, guys. Like when you cut into that fruit and you put it in half and it's Jesus's face, it is just a coincidence. It's not Jesus appearing to you in an apple. Right? So crazy coincidences that look like things, that aren't things, can occur, right? It's just one of those things. So I want to take you on to the next component of this story. Who's got the next major after Blast, right? Everyone's saying it's Starladder. It's been reported it's Starladder. And we were like, wow, Starladder haven't been around since like 2019. And they're back. They're so back. And obviously everyone was like, wow, that's like actually kind of cool, because we all know terrible situation in Ukraine. They were based in Kiev, and it's super tough to host tournaments and all that. They're back. And it's just good. It's just a cool story. They've been out of the game for a while. I wonder how they're going to make it all work. Where are they going to host the tournament? Turned out Budapest. Okay, that all sounds super cool. Anyway, Starladder acquired by Nodwin Gaming for $5.5 million. Esports tournament organizer Starladder has been acquired by esports and gaming company Nodwin Gaming for an initial consideration of $5.5 million. It has been announced that Roman Romantsov, that's a hard TS, Romantsov, yeah, romance, like romancing the stone, Roman Romantsov, the founder of Starladder, will continue to run the business and has become a shareholder of Nodwin Gaming. Founded in 2011, Starladder made headlines last year by announcing the return of its famous Counter-Strike brand Star Series to the esports calendar. However, on January 25th, 2025, the tournament organizer announced that spring season in May has been cancelled due to scheduling conflicts. This is because the major got extended, and ultimately it was going to overlap with the major, which seems like a bit of an oversight from everyone. And they had to cancel their tournament. But anyway, you're going to go. Richard, that's fine. Tournament organisers are bought by big conglomerations all the time. What's this got to do with esports fuckery and monopolization of the scene? Why are you talking obsessively about ESL? Well, there's an interesting aspect to this that not many people would have known at a glance, and that is that Nodwin has a connection. Multiple, in fact. I wrote about it on Substack, and for some reason, no one submits my work to Reddit anymore. No one cares about Richard. Irrelevant. Hashtag fell off. Hashtag washed. Hashtag bald. Right? But HLTV, they explicitly said in their report that it had a historic tie to ESL. And I can tell you, people didn't like that very much. And I did a breakdown and elaborated on it and threw in a few more for good measure. You'll see Ralph Reichart there at the top. And I'm going to just read you this piece. It's not very long. But I want you to drink in all of the information from this piece and just consider a few things. So first of all, we know, by the way, that, well, we don't know. We assume ESL has been out of favor with Valve because they haven't had a major since Rio. And most people in the industry are like, yeah, Valve are making decisions to award the majors to other companies because they don't like ESL for reasons that we can only speculate about. And so Starladder getting a major instead of ESL was kind of a shock. And then ESL get bought by a company. And you go, oh, right. So, the long-running Ukrainian... This is on Richard Lewis's Substack. Do subscribe. By the way, I will say this. Even though no one is submitting my shit to fucking Reddit anymore, and people are just like, oh, yawn. It's over, Richard. Just let it go. Stop being like that one dude who wouldn't surrender until the Emperor turned up. Stop being that guy. The revenue's up on the Substack. Revenues up on the Substack, subscribers are up on the Substack, paid subscribers are up on the Substack, views and hits and clicks are up on the Substack. Everything's trending upwards. It's all going gravy. Anyway, the long-running Ukrainian esports tournament producer Starladder was purchased by Nodwin Gaming for the sum of $5.5 million. The deal comes after Starladder had revealed they were making a return to producing Counter-Strike events in 2025, with some reports suggesting one would be an official Valve major. Nodwin Gaming, owned by parent company Nazara Technologies, have produced esports events in the past, particularly in India and surrounding countries. This is where you have to start paying attention. The deal, however, has raised some eyebrows due to a number of potential connections with the Savvy Games Group, owners of ESL, ESEA, Esports Engine, Faceit and DreamHack, as well as overlap with executives of the Saudi Arabian Esports World Cup, namely CEO Ralph Reichart. While there is nothing explicitly forbidden about the move, some industry experts are viewing it as a means to shore up control of the Counter-Strike space by a wealthy coalition of significant influence. It comes at a time when Valve have taken a greater interest in regulating their tournament circuit. Their new rules hold tournament operators accountable in a number of ways, most notably by forcing commitment to tournament dates, as well as ensuring there can be no exclusionary business dealings with participating organizations. Let's take a look at the timeline. In 2018, Nazara Technologies acquired Nodwin Gaming specifically for the purpose of executing its own esports tournaments. Shortly after that purchase, ESL invested in Nazara to the tune of 1.11% in shares. As part of that agreement, Nazara were given licensing rights to run events under the ESL India brand for 5 years, which was executed by the Nodwin team. By the way, also saw some people on Reddit and social media saying 1.11%, that's nothing. Why would anyone care about that? Well, it's like, yeah, when you're talking about a huge technology company, that's actually significant. And the fact that baked into that deal was for 5 years you have our brand rights in a territory everyone's trying to crack. Yeah, I think the deal was significant actually, but whatever. We know that in 2021 Ralph Reichart was given the designation of director for Nodwin Gaming, that designation explicitly being referenced as active in the most recently available financial reports from Nazara, and there it is, right? There he is, Ralph Reichart, director, appointed March 2021. And what was interesting was, when you looked at like the financial filings, the websites for Nodwin, all this stuff, Ralph wasn't publicly known as being a director. He wasn't mentioned anywhere. Not a picture of him. It wasn't explicit. It was just literally, he is one, and you will only know if you look at the financial records. All these other names, public-facing in some capacity. Ralph Reikart's wasn't. Go figure. Seems strange. Anyway, also happening in 2021 was a partnership agreement between ESL and long-running German esports marketing company Freaks for You. That agreement, and again, all of these things are linked. You can go look. You can go follow it. There it is. Right. That agreement gave them the rights to produce ESL and DreamHack events with shared commercialization. Why would that be relevant? Because in 2024, Nodwin Gaming International, a subsidiary of Nodwin Gaming, purchased a majority stake in Freaks for You and placed several of its executives on the board of directors. At the end of last year, Nodwin secured investment from parent company Nazara to the tune of £5.9 million. They then make the purchase of Starladder for a deal worth a reported $5.5 million with a $2 million cash payment. By the way, that's unbelievably cheap for theoretically what they're getting. A $2 million down payment on the entirety of the Starladder company, essentially, with the rest to be paid over time, is wild. But whatever. The owner of Starladder, Roman Romantsov, will stay on to run the company, but it isn't clear who else will have influence over the operations. Certainly we know there's a number of former ESL staff now currently in executive positions within Nodwin. In February 2024, an 18-year company veteran, Niels Walter, left ESL to work as Nodwin's chief integration officer. In the press release announcing the move to Nodwin Gaming, Nodwin Gaming specifically stated that Walter was the point of contact for their DreamHack India projects. Merlin Wiederking, who spent 10 years at ESL and 5 years at Nodwin, is now listed as a director of Starladder on LinkedIn. The Nodwin co-founder, Ashkat Rafi, also explicitly listed ESL/EFG as being a partner that had funded them in a blurb for an upcoming conference on blockchain in Dubai, because, of course, it's a blockchain Dubai. And you can see here, look, it says, the Nodwin gaming journey has been funded by partners such as Nazara Technologies, ESL/EFG, now part of Savvy PIF, Krafton, the makers of PUBG, and recently Sony Group Corporation. Now, look, I'm not going to necessarily take that as fucking gospel, because it is just a bio for his upcoming fucking speech at a blockchain summit in Dubai, which just sounds like, the kind of thing I would go to if I hated myself. But ultimately, it's a very different framing of, they own a tiny little percentage because, it's good for business and they're going to let us produce their events in this region because it's good for business. But to then saying, hey, we're funded by ESL, EFG, who are now in the Savvy Games Group, and the Savvy Games Group is the PIF, where we were kind of ahead of time funded by the company that's in the PIF. Internationally, Nodwin Gaming is also partnered with the Global Esports Federation, GEF, or Jeff, or GEF, in a deal that enables them to operate approved esports titles in India, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Dubai, Bahrain, Jordan, Thailand, Vietnam, and the entire African continent. In turn, the Global Esports Federation is merged with the International Esports Federation, the IESF, in a strategic partnership called the Esports Leadership Group, ELG. That entity is chaired by Prince Faisal bin Bandar bin Sultan Al Saud. So, just in case that last part is too mental for you to process, just acronyms and abbreviations battering your brain in, and indeed an acronym and an abbreviation are two different things. What's happened there is one group of esports executives claiming that they own all the licenses to esports in their territories, and another group of executives claiming they have all the licenses to their esports territories, came together under one umbrella organization, which was controlled by Prince Faisal, he himself kind of having the mandate from MBS to ultimately do stuff in the esports sphere, because that's all part of Saudi wanting to get into the Olympics. Well, that's already happened. They now control all of the esports Olympics for now until 2036 or whatever the fuck it is. It's all Saudi approved. Saudi, they see that as real legitimacy. They're still living in a world where where the Olympics is actually how you truly sports wash your reputation, right? And so, just in case you weren't gathering the connection, Nodwin Gaming, the company that just bought Starladder, also has a relationship there with the Saudi Arabian royal family because Nodwin Gaming owned the federation that controlled the territories I just read to you. I'll read you this next part. For additional context, many were surprised when Starladder announced their comeback for 2025. The scale and stature of the events the company was now producing was a far cry from their glory days. Being based in Kiev, I have to say now, had also, as expected, taken a significant toll on their on both their livelihood and lives. Sorry, that's a typo. Their last Counter-Strike major, Berlin 2019, was plagued with problems and widely regarded as one of the lesser entities in the illustrious tournament's history. So when they confidently tossed their hat in the ring for 4 years across 25 and 26, there was a lot of surprise about their return. That surprise turned to shock when reports were circulated they would be given the rights to another major in December of 2025. Starladder's first event was due to take place in the last week of May this year, but a decision by Valve to extend the timeline of the first major of 25 meant the events would overlap and therefore it was cancelled. In retrospect, that decision can now take on a different significance. There's an industry-wide perception that ESL have fallen out of favour with Valve as they haven't been awarded the rights to a major since the Intel Extreme Masters Rio in 2022. If Starladder were indeed the choice that were producing the second major of 25, that would have been 5 in a row without ESL inclusion, and none since the release of the flagship title CS2. It's not difficult then to see why people might believe ESL were on the outs. ESL have a long history of aggressive activity in the marketplace, historically designed to hold dominant positions over certain esports titles. This includes an attempt to create an exclusivity league in 2015, purposefully scheduled for when Valve take their annual holiday in Hawaii. The socio-political implications of them being wholly owned by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund has also further complicated business relationships by implication. And so, there were some people, not me, but there were some people that were like, oh, well, here's what ESL have done. Ralph Reichart has installed all of his cronies over at Starladder. And again, I'm not saying this, Ralph. This is what they are saying on the internet, right? That ESL installed their cronies over at Starladder. And funnily enough, there were some people that like now have changed their titles on LinkedIn and what have you. And they ultimately have used their relationship with Nodwin, who certainly want to have this big position, to basically get, by Starladder and by extension, by paying Roman $2 million, they've essentially got the rights to the major that Valve didn't award them. And that there will be multiple ESL people and ESL partners that will reap the dividends of that agreement. Now, obviously, they're all saying it's nonsense and it's just a coincidence, and the reason that everybody that all those ESL executives that were moved over to Nodwin ahead of this deal, that was just one of those things that happens because who else are you going to employ in esports? You're going to employ the best people. Best people have all worked at ESL. What are you going to do? And by the way, I know this upset the right people, me noticing these coincidences, which is certainly all they are. Because the one comment on this article, by the way, if you read the Substack, leave a comment, guys. But the what was Roman. And he said a lot of pro players have different opinions about the quality of the major in Berlin. Everything else is a fucking conspiracy theory, ! And he linked to the part where it's one of the people he worked with at the event saying, oh, we did a great job. We did the stage show in 3 days or whatever. And obviously Starladder did have that good stage show with the people like abseiling and all of that stuff. And people are going, yeah, the stage show was great. The rest of the event fucking sucked. You had all the tech delays, tech problems. There were issues beyond your control as well. Classic pre-major update. Of all the things to be upset about, you're upset that I'm saying people don't really remember the Starladder major all that favourably. So I guess that even if Starladder now wasn't, which it isn't, embedded in the ESL Esports World Cup empire, I wouldn't have been working it then. I think we can safely say that answers that question. All of which is to say, again, Valve have really got to take a look at this because of all of the implications. If I didn't know any better, I'd say what was happening was essentially they were going to use the financing from Nodwin, which is Indian money, essentially to build up another esports circuit that was going to get sold to the Saudis. If I didn't know any better, I would say that's what was going on. And then if that is what's going on, and once again, it's going to be all of Ralph's henchmen that are going to all fucking reap the financial benefits and rewards of that, then, you know, Valve might want to think a bit more carefully. I just wish Valve would just do the decent thing. Here's what you do, Valve. You say, listen, you can have your empire. You can do it. Esports World Cup's not getting any VRS points. Cologne, Katowice, they're not getting any VRS points. You've got cards to play here, but I don't know. Like Valve they seem to get outmaneuvered on these things, and it's happened time and time again. And even if the second half, even if the Starladder thing, even if this is a conspiracy, and it's like, listen, I know how Ralph operates. It's very hard not to see the pieces on the chessboard as being connected. And funnily enough, not long after this piece, people at Nodwin were reaching out to me going, oh, we'd love to give you an interview and explain. And the problem with that is I'm happy to sit down and do an interview with you, but what's the point? Because you're almost certainly going to lie to me anyway. Like, if it was a conspiracy, you're not going to go. It's like, by virtue of asking the question, so, look, you, the head of the CIA, did you kill Kennedy? Oh, well, yeah. Since as you asked, yeah, we did. We totally did. And Oswald was a patsy. You got us. You know, you're not going to answer the fucking question, are you? Honestly. The only purpose an interview would serve would be ultimately to create a platform for propaganda. And so there is an element of, if I'm going to interview you, I have to be curious and have not formed my own opinions, or I have to genuinely believe you're going to answer the questions in good faith. You know, but we'll see. I'm not ruling it out. I might do it, but ultimately, I definitely want Valve to take a look at it because it's very surreal. I mean, you could even just by looking at the timeline, you could go, well, what if ESL sort of waited until Starladder got the award, and then they maneuvered and talked to Nodwin and said, oh, you'll be getting a CS major essentially, and blah. That's really lucrative. You know, that's one of the ways you can make money. You know, it's kind of crazy. It was crazy watching, literally on the day this was announced, people just pressing a button and, oh, we're at Starladder now. We're a vice president of product at Starladder now. Oh, okay. That seems fine. All these ESL stalwarts, you know. So it's kind of fucked up that ultimately, once again, the appearance at least is, even if you were working a Starladder event, ESL would have some influence over that. The implication for teams, the implication for talent, especially, the implication for fans, you know, it's not great. It's not great. And ultimately as well, ignoring all of that, shelving the Starladder talk, just the potential to alternate circuits. You know, PGL are in good faith trying to create a product that's, you know, good for fans, good for players, good for the orgs, good for the game, good for the scene, good for the space. But by virtue of not wanting to pay appearance fees or to take a chunk out of the prize pool and give it to the orgs, and we don't call that an appearance fee for some reason, they're essentially going to get penalised by people on the VRS tour in what appears, based on the evidence, to be pre-agreed upon. I don't know. That wasn't what I had in mind when Valve said no more business dealings. It isn't what I had in mind when Valve said we're going to move to an open circuit. And it shouldn't be what you had in mind either, but ultimately, that's where we are. And so, in a few days, I will be flying out to Cluj and working an event and watching Reddit go, there's no teams there, tier 2 event, well, fuck PGL sound guy, and just sat there reading that. When really, there are some serious implications for what's going on behind the scenes that, once again, the average fan doesn't seem to understand or doesn't seem to care about. And that's bad, because that takes us to exactly where we were with the partnered leagues. And I know everyone's pissed off with the VRS point system right now, but ultimately the VRS circuit works. The VRS circuit, when the algorithm is tweaked and the way that it works is made to make more sense, that's going to prevent any of the fuckery we have in the partnered leagues era. And I want to remind everyone, in the partnered leagues era, that was what enabled dog shit like NIP and EG to just go to S-tier tournaments again and again and again and fail again and again and just pick 5 random players again and again and again and not care about the game, not care about the broadcast, serve up dog shit and sit at 25 in the world rankings, while other hardworking teams like Ents, for example, they weren't getting a cut from that table. That's so fucking worse than where the VRS will take us, that you have to look at what's happening right now, and you should want the space to be the open circuit that rewards merit, not some clandestine runoff from the machinations of people in Riyadh.